Good morning, everyone. Today's video is trimming these pots, which I threw yesterday. And I came out this morning to put a chuck on the wheel and realized I had forgotten I'd left the hump because something came up and I didn't finish the hump. So the hump was sitting on the wheel here, and it was still, because the clay was really soft to begin with, it's still pretty wet. Decided to take advantage of it. And this is something I like to do when the timing's right, is use the hump to trim on, and then when I'm finished trimming, finish throwing the hump with some more pots. Anyway, this is just so, you probably recognize one of these. It's a sponge from an Orton cone box. This clay is so soft it'll stick to the pot, so I'm just sticking that over there, and then the pot just goes right on it, just like that. And holds quite nicely. The one thing that's inconvenient is if you're trimming, your little crumbs will end up on the hump, so you want to wrap something around there a little bit to protect most of that, so you don't have to dig little pieces of clay out of your hump before you can throw next time. That leaves a little spot open, but you know, can't have everything. And so the trimming process is basically like, as I've shown before, the same thing. Quick once or twice around the outside. That didn't work out like I planned. This one was a little bit high. I'm going to take it down a bit. That'll be better. Okay. I can already tell that'll be better. The only drawback of doing that, I only do it when I have to. The drawback is you lose all those nice thread marks from when you cut it off the wheel. Those are nice to have, in my opinion. But if the foot's just really too tall like that, you really got no choice. I should have just trimmed it a little more carefully off the wheel, I guess. Big rock in the foot there. Okay. Any crumbs that are sticking up, now's the time to get rid of them rather than after it's dry or bisqued. Give it a quick stamp, and it's done. Okay, next. With the sponge on, it's hard to tap it to center, but it's usually easy enough to get it centered in a couple seconds. Yeah. And I've probably talked about chucks before, but definitely my favorite chuck to have is a raw chuck when I can get one. Of course, not obviously this is raw, but not as soft as this. Raw chucks are great for sticking to the pot and not leaving scars and dings on them when you're trimming them, but they're so hard to keep the right dryness. So hard to keep them from drying out completely. And you can keep them stored in bags with wet towels and things like that, but then it's just constant, I don't know, if you like the smell of mold, maybe that's great, but I'm constantly living here on Kyushu where it's really humid. I'm constantly trying to keep the dust and mold down, so I've gone to using, for the chucks that I just have sitting around, I have fired chucks like this, and then covered with like sheeting material, like just bed sheets, and those work really well. If you wet the bed sheet before you use it, it sticks to the pot pretty well. With a little practice, they work great. But today's chuck was a chuck of opportunity, and it's working great. So. Now I'm not trimming like this because I say everybody should trim it like this in these steps, or using the tool at whatever angle it's being used or in the direction it's being used. That's just sort of what I'm preferring lately for the shape of the foot. You trim in different steps. Change the steps, you get a different shaped foot. Change the angle, you get a different shaped foot. So it's all basically your personal preference. Okay, and you could do it differently, like you would do an Edo style trimming or something like that, where you start out low and work your way up, like this. And that's a way to do it too. You have a completely different foot that way. The previous way I was doing it leaves a nice bamboo node. This is more of a spiral climbing up the foot. It's more of a real basic sort of foot. It leaves a spiral going up the foot a bit. And not quite as much of an angle where the foot meets the pot. That's fine too. Just play around with it, find what you like. But when you're using like really rough clay like this, it's probably best not to play with it too much. Ending up with a really perfect machined looking foot is not a great match for this kind of clay. Maybe for porcelain or fine clay, things like that. Here's maybe a different type of foot would be a little more of a sort of a perfect standard straight up and down on both sides foot. I'm going to trim that down a little bit, it's a little high. So just coming in here, you can come in here and take that off. If you want a 90-degree angle between here and here, you can do that. Just come in. Done. Make sure those little crumbs squish down. Way easier to squish them down now than to have to grind them off later after the firing, because the pot's not sitting quite flat. One advantage I noticed now when I was doing the bamboo node foot, I was going in at a bit of an angle here and then coming in here or here like this. When I did that, the actual diameter of the foot at the very base was smaller, and it fit a little bit more with the width of the pot here. This one I just noticed, I just went straight up and down. The diameter is a bit wider as a result, and from here, looking in the mirror at it, I have a mirror across my wheel so I can see what I'm looking at, but it looks a tad wide. It's not terrible, but I kind of prefer that optical illusion, at least, of it being a little bit narrower. When it is wider like that, it takes sometimes more than a turn to get the tool out far enough from the center so that you're not leaving a big thick foot ring. A lot of people like those big, thick Mingei foot rings, and they're certainly utilitarian. And they look kind of cool. But they're just sort of not my thing, so I try to steer clear. I hope none of the Mingei folks take offense at that. And you can see I'm not trying super hard to make sure it's perfectly centered. There's a little wobble there, but that's fine. It's not going to hurt anything. I go back to the way I was doing it, because that's the way I was sort of digging it this morning. But I seem to have lost my groove. I think that I trimmed these off a little too high yesterday in general, which means I didn't throw them at the base as thinly as I thought I was throwing them. So something to remember for next time. There's always something to improve on. All right, one more, and that should do it for this video. Lest I bore you all with my jabbering, repetitive motions. And the wheel's making funny noises. All right, here, this one is too tall too. So, learn from the last one, trim it down first. Make life easier. Sometimes it benefits from being on over one more time for that trimmed surface right here, because if you come in from this direction or this direction, sometimes it raises a burr on that middle of that node. And scoop out the middle. I'm sort of touching that lightly. I just want to take the burrs down. I don't want to take away all, I don't want to smooth it over too much. All right. That one was pretty thin on the bottom. It came through a tad. I need to make sure that that doesn't open up when it dries. If it does, recycle pile, I guess. All right. Thanks for watching, everybody.